Welcome back to the Nomad CEO. I'm here with Bryan Hardy from Canada, and he's a men's health coach. I'm really honored to have him on the show. This is a topic that obviously interests me myself because I've been on a journey with my health, and I'm in my 40s, so this is a big topic, obviously, because we're not getting younger here as well. And so usually I just start out my podcast by asking the same question, which is, how did you end up on your journey? What was your transformation and your pivotal moment? Since I just mentioned, I brought up this personal thing because when I had my breakthrough, well, before the breakthrough, there was this, I had a bankruptcy, right? So, but also that triggered something inside me that allowed me to focus on myself and my health first, like quitting alcohol, for example. And also I've been more relentless in terms of what I'm putting into my body, right? So ended up going on a keto diet, and that totally transformed my body from 22% to 10% body fat, increasing muscle mass. And so it's been a journey, especially in the last 4-5 months. I'm in 47 now, and I did not believe, I wouldn't believe, if you had told me that like a year ago what was possible with just changing your nutrition, I would not have believed you. So just wanted to preface and get this out of the way. So I'm excited to have you on the show. Welcome, Bryan.
Yeah, thank you, Roman. Thank you. And congratulations. That's fantastic. That's a massive transformation that you've made. And I'm so glad to hear that you are now a living, breathing, walking example of what's possible when you clean up your nutrition and when you eat in a metabolically appropriate fashion for your age, your goals, your genetics, and whatever else you've got going on. So that's fantastic. Keep it up. Definitely keep it up. For me, my real journey into health, into coaching other men in this regard, into basically health becoming my obsession, my passion, my life. It started through crisis, similar to yourself. And so if you can imagine, at 18 years old, so this was, I'm 33 now, so that's quite a few years ago. 18 years old, lying in a hospital bed. I've got 2 giant infected wounds in my abdomen, and I can look down and I can see the stitches that are holding my abs together through this open hole. And that moment was a sobering moment. That was my first taste of rock bottom. That was my first really coming that close to death and coming that close to my mortality and recognizing I am going to die one day, and this life is incredibly fragile. This body is incredibly fragile. A couple of weeks before this, I was feeling amazing. I was working out all the time. I'm in my first year of university. Everything's going great. And then here I am wasting away in a hospital bed with this giant infected wound in my abdomen. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what happened? How did you end up in that hospital bed in that sort of state with such a wound? Well, my appendix ruptured and was completely misdiagnosed by the first hospital that I went to. So I was really sick for a week and then had intense pain beyond anything I'd ever experienced or imagined. And I have a very high pain tolerance in general. I've broken many bones. I've gotten all kinds of bumps and bruises, and I've always been into extreme sports, athletics, martial arts, etc. So my pain tolerance is fairly high. But what came on after a week of being sick that led to my appendix rupturing was enough for me to seriously contemplate, or at least be able to empathize with people who check out early, people who kill themselves. Because I thought, if this continues for too long, I'm not going to be able to handle it. And that was, essentially my insides imploding, my insides tearing apart and my appendix just releasing all kinds of infection throughout my abdomen. Now, luckily, by the grace of God and the advances of medical science, I am alive. They were able to keep me alive. They did emergency surgery. They pumped me full of antibiotics for a number of months, and they saved my life. And so modern medicine, I owe an intense debt of gratitude to modern medicine and scientific advancement for being here today. And yet, those same doctors and nurses who kept me alive had very little to tell me when it came to being well. when it came to what could I have done to have prevented this, or what should I do to make sure that I take better care of myself in the future. They didn't have a lot to say, right? I asked my doctor, why did this happen? Like, does this, just randomly happen? And he said, well, we don't really know why it happens. It's kind of genetics and, it just seems to happen to some people, but don't worry about that. Just focus on feeling better. And I was very unsatisfied with that answer. I wanted to know, because something that was such a dramatic shift and that could have killed me, would have killed me had I not had life-saving surgery. I wanted to know, like, how did this happen? Clearly, there has to be a reason. And I was studying automotive engineering at the time. So my brain has always worked in that sort of wanting to understand what are the pieces, what's going on beneath the hood, and, what was the situation or environment that led to this result. So I just became obsessed, and I started finding naturopathic doctors and nutritionists, and then I started reading on the topic of nutrition and integrative or holistic nutrition, functional nutrition, like nutrition as a primary means of supporting the body. And I just became obsessed, right? I became absolutely mind blown. And because of the amount of antibiotics that I had taken to stay alive and the amount of scar tissue I developed in my abdomen, it took me about 3 years after that surgery to feel normal again. And when I say normal again, I mean I was having intense bouts of bloating, digestive pain, anxiety, depression, burnout, brain fog. All these things came as an after effect of my digestive system being completely wrecked. I lost my ability to really be focused, to have drive, libido. I had no interest in pursuing women, and I was like 19, 20 at the time. And so the fact that my digestive system lost its functioning post-antibiotic treatment really made me start questioning things and wanting to understand what was going on. So it took me about 3 years and a lot of trial and error and a lot of help from some amazing people to really get myself back to feeling okay, feeling like myself again, feeling like I could perform again and push myself. And ever since then, I have just been obsessed and wanting to share so that other men don't have to have a crisis, don't have to have a near-death experience to wake them up to not just how good it feels to be healthy. And this now experientially, right? You now versus you a year ago, I'm certain that your day-to-day life is more enjoyable, is more pleasurable, is more energetic, is probably less achy or stiff or painful. Your brain, I'm certain works better than it did prior to your journey. And so I want guys to understand that we are designed to thrive. We are designed to feel good and have brains that work well and have a strong, healthy sex drive and libido, and to have a body that is resilient to stress. And these days we find ourselves up against an immense amount of stress in many situations or careers and sort of, modern North American or European ways of life. Stress has probably never been so high and so chronic as it is these days. So there's a lot of things that would destroy our vitality, and my mission is to help men to understand what those are, and then to design a life that fits around that so that they don't have to become the average man who is overweight, depressed, addicted to drugs, addicted to porn, addicted to cheap dopamine from his computer screen or his mobile phone, and living a very disconnected and disempowered way of life.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think this is one of the most important professions. I'm gonna call you. What you're doing is a calling, I think, because we need more of that. We need more men's spaces. We need more male education. We need more encouragement for young men, because sadly it has become the norm that most guys are just aimlessly wandering around, not knowing, purposeless, fat, malnutrition, and distracted, quite frankly. It's not only a male issue, the distraction and everything, I guess, but what is unique, I think, to men's situation or the discussion around men's issues is that, first of all, just having the discussion is a problem. Most of that, you're like encouraging a man, like what you just brought up, right? So you said one of the goals of what you're doing is to vitalize and their drive and like libido and just just focusing on that, and so that men can thrive and be well and have just that is already being sort of demonized, right? So just the mere fact that someone is actually only focusing on these issues instead of not taking into account what women might think about it is already controversial, right? And that boggles my mind. And that's also the reason why I do this podcast, and I'm only focusing on men, because I think there's a supply and demand problem here. We have this over demand of, but there's just too many, and I'm not blaming women for this, don't misunderstand. I'm just saying that there's too many men that don't have their shit together. And it starts, and I think what you're doing is really important, because it starts with your nutrition. It's really what you put into your body is so crucial. Now, I don't think that what you experience personally, like the appendix situation, is something you could always, I mean, it just happens, right? This can be a genetic predisposition, and you don't know, with no fault of yours. I mean, I am not a doctor, but I know that this shit just happens, and then the clinicians or the doctor they did not prevent this, or in that case, no, I don't know what happened exactly, but could also have been human failure, right? From a doctor's side or whatever.
Yeah,
But I think your focus is right. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that you turned your wound into your purpose, and now you're sharing because 3 years is a long time to be in pain. Like, you can actually go nuts in that. I mean, I had similar situations, not the same, obviously. I had in my adolescence, I had a infection in my. So they removed the four. What's the name of these teeth again?
Wisdom teeth.
The wisdom teeth.
Yeah.
And it got infected. And so what happened is it was swollen, but not for a day or so. It was like for a whole year. It just would not heal. It was infected all the time. It was during my puberty, and then they had this face like that, and that got bullied during that time. So that was also traumatic, but it's only a year or so until they opened it again, and then finally got solved it. It's not 3 years different, and it's probably also it was not as painful as your experience. And then later on in life, and just not long ago, with different types of pain through bankruptcy, which is mental issue. We all go through these situations: pain, suffering, hardship. It's all the same.
Yeah.
And then when we get the message, like, if we understand, if we know how to accept this and then move on and integrate it and then turn it into something positive, is when the magic happens. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let me just be clear, knowing what I know now, I think I absolutely caused the conditions for my appendix to rupture. I think it's a combination of many years of constipation, which I was constipated almost my entire life. I thought that was normal, right? Sitting on a toilet and like straining to have a bowel movement was normal to me. I didn't know. You're supposed to have your feet up and be in a squatting position, and you're supposed to be eating like a certain amount of, really soothing, soft fiber and stuff to get things moving through your system. I didn't know this stuff. I was addicted to pizza and fucking ice cream as a kid. And candies and cookies and things, right? I was hooked on that shit. I didn't eat well for the first 17 plus years of my life. I mean, I would have good dinners. My mom would make a nice dinner, but any meal that I was kind of fending for myself, it could be pizza, it could be, just toast and cheese, it could be French fries, whatever. And so I was definitely constipated and full of toxicity leading up to that appendix rupture. And I think that absolutely played a role. And I think in those situations now, there are ways you could actually prevent the rupturing from taking place if you act very swiftly and very quickly. But it's a hard thing to do because most people just don't know what's going on. And the next thing you know, you're having surgery. And for most people, the surgery is very minor and very easy to recover from, as long as it hasn't ruptured yet. Either way, as you said, it is absolutely the case that all of us, like pain in whatever form, in physical form, in my case, in mental emotional form with your financial situation, mental emotional form for me as an adolescent with acne all over my face, right? Another diet inflicted, condition. I used to have pimples everywhere, right? And that stuff all cleared up, and people are now like, they don't believe me that I was a skinny, bloated, like skinny, fat, acne-ridden, unconfident kid. But that's who I was. That's absolutely who I was. But all of these things, whether it's mental stress, emotional stress, physical stress, it all goes into the same bucket of stress. And it's only once that bucket overflows that we tend to have symptoms. And this is why somebody will be doing okay. I have guys that, they're in their mid 30s or mid 40s. They're doing okay. They're performing at work. Maybe they're married, they have kids or a family, they want to start a family. But then something happens, like they lose a parent or they get fired. And that stress is enough of a shock to their system that they start to have physical symptoms, right? The stress becomes too much and it starts to manifest as physical symptoms. So someone could very easily, going through something that seems like it's just, mental, financial, emotional, that could very easily turn into physical illness. And it often does. And it certainly doesn't help the situation. But as you were saying, in terms of the wound becoming the service or the gift or the calling, I think that that's a very, very common thing where life, God, source, your soul, whatever you want to call it, I think there's a bigger intelligence to this that is attempting to lead us on this evolutionary journey that often requires a lot of pain in order to kind of humble us and get us open enough to try something new or to be open to different, perspectives or possibilities, and to start to really like make us hungry for more, make us really desiring more understanding, more knowledge, more success, more confidence, more physical capacity, strength, whatever it is. But it's the lack of those things that creates this desire for more, right? So when I lacked health, health became my number one value. If I lack connection with women, that's going to become a very important thing in my life. And I see this with most of the men that I speak to and most of the men that I work with, that they are lacking this sense of a body that is really working for them, right? They feel like they're at odds with their body, like they're just trying to get through the day and like numb out with alcohol and snack food, and then they look in the mirror and they don't like what they see, and they don't like their mood, and they don't like their energy. And it's because there's no harmony happening, right? They're not serving their body is in pain, their body's trying to speak to them and say, hey, pay attention. Right? Pain in the body is a signal to pay attention. Symptoms are signs, they're messages, they're trying to talk to you. Symptoms are signals, right? It's a message. It's your body trying to talk to you. It's your life trying to talk to you and draw your attention to make a change. And I saw that dramatically with myself, but I see it with everybody that I speak to. No matter how subtle or how extreme, there's always something there. If we slow down and pay attention, there's always something there that's kind of either whispering like, hey, look over here. And if we don't listen, eventually that whisper becomes a scream and then becomes a crisis of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah, this is true. I had a guest not long ago who said it beautifully. He said that, I'm going to quote him, life is just going to get louder and louder until you can't overhear it anymore. Like it's just life is gonna scream at you. Like it starts slowly and silent, and then it goes the volume goes up, right? And then until you get to the point where you cannot ignore what's going on anymore. And your body, yeah, that is like this perfect machine giving you updates. But most people are just too disconnected from their bodies, and especially if you, I mean, I get it, when you're young, you just this is just, I think it's normal. We're young, and then we think this machine is just working all the time, and we don't worry about any of this. So I was in my 20s, I call my rock star years, I was just not worried at all. I was drinking like I don't know, and doing drugs, and I try. I don't even want to go back to it because the amount of excess and bad food and poor nutrition and all of that, the things that I put into my body and I stressed my body with, it's actually a miracle that I'm so healthy now. I'm grateful for it, because without the health, it's just all fucked. Like all of it. Nothing can be done, right?
Yeah.
So it should be our first priority. But also what surprises me is that because we are, as human beings, we constantly compare things, right? And so unless we have a reference point, we don't really know the extent of the things we're talking about. So we need always this comparison. We need to know, so is this bad or this good, or how does this relate to this and that? And so in terms of health, you don't really know what you're missing out until you, for example, until you stop smoking more than or longer than 6 months, right? Then because the benefits, they kick in afterwards. Or you don't really know how your anxiety level goes down once you stop consuming alcohol, for example. Or you don't really know how much more focused you are until you stop consuming so much sugar, for example. This is really just so until you have the real world experience from these changes and implementations, and you don't really know what you're missing out on.
I know, which is like the most troubling part of it all. It's so frustrating because if there was a way to give someone an experience for like a day of how good it feels, how stable it can feel, how, confidence, sort of reassuring and solid you can feel when your body is dialed in and feeling good and you've got your nutrition dialed in your lifestyle, like that baseline of like pretty awesome, feeling pretty, dang good. It's very hard to explain if you've never experienced it. It's impossible, I would say. It's something that has to be felt. It has to be experienced for one to truly understand what they're missing. And that's often, what I share with individuals is that just think of this as an experiment and give yourself the opportunity to see what your body is capable of. Just give yourself that opportunity, right? There's no downside, right, to investing in your health, to putting your nutrition, up a few notches or being more mindful. There's no downside to these things, right? It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, maybe a little bit of a financial investment, but there's no downside to taking better care of yourself. Like I have never heard from somebody, hey, I really regret putting all of my focus and intention into that program or into that dietary change. I feel better, but it just wasn't worth it, right? I never have heard that, never once. I've never heard it. And it's because people don't say that. It's because they say, I'm so glad that I actually just made myself a priority and, allowed myself to feel how I was designed to feel and to really give a shit about the things I put in my mouth and to raise my standards with how I take care of myself. Right? That's what you hear from people. But you have to have enough faith and have enough trust in the process to know that, okay, if I do these things and I do these, whatever it is, maybe it's doing some good blood testing to see if you're deficient in anything or checking your hormones or whatever it is. If I do these things and then I address whatever they, show as deficient or toxic or whatever, that I trust that it's going to create some sort of a change in the way I feel, in the look of my skin, the inflammation I'm carrying, the fat I'm carrying, the way my brain works, or the way my libido functions and my sex life. I'm trusting there's going to be some kind of a change. And so it takes that trust or that faith and that knowing that, okay, better is possible. Let me just keep moving towards that and doing that consistently for long enough that you get to really start, experiencing those rewards. Because it's very few things that someone can do besides certain supplements, right? Like if someone takes, preformed ketones, for example, that can immediately turn their brain back on, right? Rather than fasting or doing a ketogenic diet, which could take days or weeks to really get that sort of hit. So there are supplements, there are things that you can take that can mimic some of the effects of the consistency and give you a little glimpse into what's possible. But for the most part, it's going to require a bit of time and a bit of patience and a bit of just practicing doing things differently for a period of time. But as you do that, and as things, inflammation starts to go down, your nutrition, goes up with that. And this is what I tell people, your mood, your energy, your confidence or lack thereof is a result of the nutrients you're consuming or not consuming. Now, what do I mean by that? neurotransmitters, the chemicals, the biochemical signalers that allow us to feel certain ways, either motivated, content, joyful, driven, happy, whatever it is, or we're feeling anxious, stressed, depleted, sad, angry, etc. All of that is due to these chemical messengers. And so if we're not consuming the food, typically protein and amino acids, that breaks down and forms that dopamine, right? Or that breaks down and forms that testosterone. If we're not consuming those things, or we have a gut and a digestive system that's unable to actually break that stuff down and absorb it and put it to work, if that's happening, then it's impossible for you to feel as good as you could feel until we address those pieces. So I always have people, just understand that if your body was a vehicle, right, you have to give it the right fuel, the right oil, the right coolant. It has to have all those things working together in order to produce function. But somehow we think, because we're not taught in most educational systems, we're not taught nutrition, we're not taught healthy living, we just assume that as long as I'm eating stuff, even if it's just like bread and French fries, as long as I'm eating enough food, I should have enough energy, right? And it should be, nothing more than that, which is, it's just not the case. And you experience that very quickly when you make a change similar to yourself, right? And you cut out all sugars or things like that. You experience that difference very profoundly and very experientially.
Yeah, so actually, I would go further, and I actually would argue, because you said that we're not taught the right nutrition, and by the way, this is also true for financial literacy, all the important stuff like awareness and consciousness. It's all not the important, like human development, personal development stuff that people need to actually learn or should learn from young age are not being taught, or even worse, as it is, and I would argue in the case of nutrition, is we're getting taught the wrong information. It's not even, we're getting taught like stuff like this because there's a ton of myth around nutrition. Just going to give you an example, like for example, the breakfast is the most important meal, right? It's bullshit statements like that, or the healthy cereals,
Yeah,
or
healthy whole
you should,
grains. Healthy whole
yeah,
grains.
yeah, or we could go on and on, right? Or for example, that we shouldn't eat eggs because cholesterol goes up. Total bullshit. You can eat fucking 8 eggs a day and you're gonna be more healthy than anything if you, like, a lot of these lies, right? Which I think is just food industry propaganda, so they can sell more of their crap, their processed food. But I think this is changing thanks to alternative media now and voices like us who can share not just anecdotal information, but I think it's very powerful that we not. This is true also for different, not just for nutrition. Obviously, it's also true for dating, men getting together, which is like the red pill space when they talk about men's issues and dating issues, and then now you have the health space where we share information about what's actually making us feel better, like with real results, because you can actually prove this stuff. So we're living in 2025 now, you can measure everything, right? So I've got my Apple Watch on, and I've got and then I at my gym there is this machine, and it just tells me exactly my nutrition and my body composition and my everything, and so I can actually see almost in real time the effects of the changes that I'm implementing, right? And so I don't need any bullshit information. Of course, there are some sources that are trustworthy, I guess, but most of them, in terms of nutrition, I would actually argue they're just there's most of them are just trash. So my question now, to give you
Yeah.
a voice here again, is what would you think were the three biggest myths around nutrition or lies?
Yeah. Yeah. So the biggest myths, I believe the question you were leading with was, what are the three biggest myths around nutrition? Biggest myths around food? Yeah, there's many. There are many, and most of us grew up with a lot of
Yeah,
television
3 is
commercials
not enough.
reinforcing these things, right? And so we already touched on a couple like healthy whole grains, right? Would be one because most people, and for a number of reasons, right? I believe you can make certain things from grains in a more traditional way with fermentation and you know more ancestral methods of preparation. You can make them healthier, right? If we're talking about the difference between, you know, mass-produced whole wheat bread versus like an Italian grandma's sourdough from like the grains that she grew, you know, on her property that have never touched chemicals and have never been sprayed with anything, right? Those are two very different things, but they're both technically whole grains. So you need to have some context for these things. But the healthy whole grains as an essential part of a healthy diet, I find most people, myself included, do better with minimal grains, right? The exceptions there can be, as long as it's, you know, appropriate for your system, can be things like white rice. It can be pretty safe for most people as long as you don't overdo it. And sometimes oatmeal, right? Good quality oats can be pretty safe for most people. But the vast majority of wheat products and gluten-containing things are going to be nothing but inflammatory and hard to digest. And yet here they are
Yeah,
saying, you know, you should have that like 3 times a day.
I think the issue here is not that much the fact that those are, I mean, yeah, there's a difference between processed food and chemically treated food, grains, and let's say more uh, naturally grown, homegrown food. But the issue is not, I don't think it's the issue. Issue is that our body is just not built for so much carbs. The human body, if you go back into our history, for the most part, we were just hunters and gatherers, so we would not have these grain, this nutrition where so much of our daily intake is composed of grains. Like I can actually. This is what I feel. This is what the biggest revelation that I've had is that carbs are just not our best fuel. It's just better to operate on you want to train your body to use more fat as fuel instead of grains. And this is why fasting is so powerful, because you can condition your body to use your fat storage rather than be on a sugar high all the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's contextual. And like for someone like myself, who's always been lean, I overdid fasting and ketogenic diets to the point where it was not helpful anymore after a few years, right? And so I thrive with a high degree of carbohydrate, but most of that is from fruit. And that's a seasonal thing too, right? The more sun you're getting, the more carbohydrate you can tolerate. And fruit, in most cases, especially berries, is going to be way better on your system than starch, right? So the kinds of carbohydrates you get from fruit, plus the structured water you get from fruits and the vitamins and minerals, it's great fuel, particularly in the summertime, if you're metabolically healthy. But that's a big if. Many people are not. And so it has to be broken down to be contextual. And yeah, certainly if someone is attempting to lose weight, or if someone has been running on processed carbs and processed sugars and just they're inflamed and they're fat, then doing a lot of retraining of the metabolism to be able to effectively run on fat for fuel is fantastic, right? And that's going to be a life-changing intervention. It's going to bring more stability, more mental clarity, and it's going to make it easier to get to your ideal body weight, right? But I'm not someone who says, you know, that we shouldn't have carbs or that low carb forever at all times is the way to go. Certainly not. And I've seen plenty of examples, especially athletes who can tolerate a high degree of carbohydrates. Again, ideally from fruit, which is not just, you know, pure glucose as it is with starch, but ideally from things like fruit or raw honey, these things that have a lot more medicinal benefit in the system and are very easy to burn, right? They're very clean burning. They're not going to keep you as
Yeah.
full or for as long as fats and proteins, but they are still clean fuel in many cases.
Yes, I agree with you. This is true. it's also that there's a clear, carbs have a one clear advantage, and you know this if you do work, if you're an athlete. And I work out every day, so I've got my schedule. Like I do that 5 days a week. Like I'm very consistent, and what I've seen or what I've felt is like if you're just on a fat burn diet, you don't get these energy bursts. Like you can, if what I do now, I use carbs more strategically. So for example, when after that podcast, I'm probably gonna go to the gym, but I'm gonna just eat fruit before the gym. That gives me this energy boost, and I can like pull weight, like I can lift now with energy bursts. If
Yeah.
I had only like if you're on a keto, in a ketosis in that moment, you don't have the same access to immediate energy boosts. It's just not there. It's just a different type
Yeah.
of it's like a slow burner energy that goes in like in the background, as opposed to readily accessible high energy bursts like you can then use into. And then and this is also
Yeah.
measurable. Like you can just pull more, lift more weight if you have eaten some fruit prior to your workout, as opposed to
Yeah.
fat, right? So using
Yeah.
carbs strategically related to workouts and sports is, I think, is at least it's working for me. And I don't eat carbs in the evening, so I don't consume any carbs, fruits, or anything after 4 p.m. That's how I approach this.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's working, right? And it might evolve over time. And that's the thing here is,
Yeah.
especially in nutrition, it's so easy to be dogmatic, and it pisses me off to no end because people try something, it works for them, they go online saying this works for everybody, it's the best thing ever, you have to do it. We're seeing this right now with carnivore, right? That's become the latest fad or the latest trend. Before it was veganism, plant-based, now it's, carnivore, no plants, all this nonsense. And like they both have benefits, right? But neither one is optimal for your entire lifetime in all situations, in all circumstances, for all individuals. And so it really bugs me that people get taken advantage of with this really simplistic, overly
Reductionist.
simplified. Yeah, it's overly simplistic and it's not necessarily relevant to who they are and their goals and their genetics and the things they're trying to do, right? Or the things that they're dealing with. So that's what bugs me about
Where
the
you
overly simplistic side of things. But like just to go on that thing, because I want to tell what happened to me as a cautionary tale for people who feel really good in ketosis and low carb diets and who also love stimulants. And so my brain gets addicted to stimulants, particularly coffee, very easily. When I was doing my low carb and my keto days, I was working a lot. I was in school and I was biking, riding my bike a lot to commute around the city of Toronto. I was also lifting weights probably 4 days a week. And I noticed, because at that point I was in the dogmatic idea that low carb is the best, ketosis is the best, it's always going to be the best, so just keep doing it. And at that point I started to also develop a love for coffee, which I didn't drink at all until I was, I don't know, 22, 23. I maybe had green tea every now and then, but I wasn't much of a caffeine drinker. But I got a taste of coffee and my brain loved it. And so I started using coffee and like protein and fat enhanced coffee drinks as a morning boost. So I would feel good. I would feel energized. I would feel cleared. Mind you, I'm just constantly hitting the cortisol button, right? More cortisol, more stress hormones, taxing my system. And after a certain point in time, I realized I was irritable. I was dependent on the stimulants in order to feel good, and I was crashing during the day. So I would wake up, have a coffee, protein, whatever, go work out, maybe have some breakfast after that, some eggs, some vegetables, and then around like 1 p.m., 2 p.m., I needed to nap. I needed to take a rest, and I was getting, solid 8 hours of sleep. So I shouldn't have needed that time, but it was just my system telling me, okay, we would actually do better lowering the stimulants, increasing a little bit of like things like fruit, things like quick energy, get that real energy instead of this artificial boost that stimulants provide, and that would be a really beneficial step. But if someone is in the mindset of, I have to intermittent fast every day, I have to do my keto coffee every day, that's the best thing ever. Oh, it made me feel so good before, it's going to continue making me feel so good. That can be a very dangerous mindset. And so you just want to be flexible, right? Try different
Yeah.
things, do experiments, see what works best for you. And that will change over time, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you as a dynamic human living a dynamic life and having to adjust to different stressors, different goals, different training, whatever it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's not a good idea to become too extreme and too close-minded. So the way I lost fat fast was through strict adherence to the keto diet, right? So I would not eat any carbs for weeks. And also I was pretty strict on my calorie intake, and in terms of the adding to this already extreme diet, I added the intermittent fasting on top of it, right? So this worked. I mean, it does work. You drop fat like nothing else ever been seen before. Like it's really super fast, but it has it taxes your system, like you're not at the same level of, you don't have the same energy, like again for you, and you can only see that you experience this when you put extreme stress on your body doing exercise, for example, right? When you see
Yeah.
how much energy you actually have available. Then when I reached my goal, the 10%, now I'm doing like different, for example, I'm sort of cycling through the week. So Monday to Wednesday, I'm lifting. So I'm eating breakfast, normal, and carbs. Then on Thursday, I do a 24-hour fast and just eat in the evening, and then no carbs. Friday, I'm gonna do weights again. Saturday, when I do weights, I eat three meals, and then Saturday intermittent, and Monday and Sunday again 24-hour fast. So I try to sort of alternate. Right now, this is working best for me. So you get your body does get some of the stuff he's yearning or he's missing out on other days. So you sort of, it's not too extreme, but you're still getting the benefits of the fasts and everything.
Yeah, and that sounds like a really good schedule because it mimics what we would be exposed to naturally. We would have times of feasting, times of fasting, times of going a day or two with no food, right? That's all very natural, and our bodies are wired for that, and they actually thrive, right? Different cellular mechanisms to clean things up and clear out dead cells and clear out, precancerous cells. All that is happening while you're doing, what you just described. So for me, it's that variety, right? That variety that keeps your body sharp. It keeps your body flexible. That to me is really the goal. But again, it's like for the average individual who's, say, working a corporate job, has a family, is living in a busy city in some place in the world, I like to keep things as simple as possible for that man, right? Who, okay, if he just cuts out the shit, cleans everything
Yeah,
up, and maybe fast a couple days a week, it's going to be massive improvement from,
yeah,
eating a nonstop onslaught of donuts and pastries and croissants and cereal and bread and pizza and burgers and all this garbage of the lowest quality. And then, using alcohol to turn off in the evening and prescription medication. It gets very complicated and very toxic very fast. And so
yes,
it's like, what are the little steps we can take to make it easy
yeah.
enough and to make it enjoyable enough to where that guy gets some quick wins and starts being like, okay, I feel good. This is good. Let me continue. And then he gets, a couple of years in or something, and then he's doing, things more of what you're describing, right? And really tweaking
With like
and
a advanced level already. For most people, it's just cutting out the crap first, right? So the sugars and the stuff like that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
100%.
agree. I think for most of us who are on the journey already for some time, it's surprising how many people do not know any of that, right? So what the percentage of men who don't even do the basic stuff, like the basic caretaking of your body. Like I think we're probably talking about how much, like 60%, 70%,
I would say
or even
so.
higher, or even higher.
Yeah, I would say so. Maybe even 80, depending on like the city and the
Yeah,
demographic. And of course, you and I
crazy.
exist in bubbles. Like typically you'll see more in entrepreneurs, people into personal development. They tend to be more at that intermediate level, right? And it's really fun to work with those people because then we can look at optimization, right? Which is easier than like disease reversal, right? And I've done both. I've had people come to me with actual like autoimmune diseases and Crohn's and colitis and serious, serious things going on. And we've been able to reverse them out of that, which is amazing. And I've had people come to me who like they're just feeling low, they're feeling not quite sharp, they're feeling puffy and inflamed. And then we get them more to a dialed in place where we're looking at, biomarkers and body fat percentages, and hormone levels, and really trying to see what's possible for them, right? What's their peak? And that's a really fun place to be.
Yeah. Yeah, this is intriguing. It intrigues me also how people get divided along those lines. So again, we're also entering a territory of controversy, sometimes even that, right? So because you brought up that like more entrepreneurs and self-development and self-help, I mean, personalities, let's call it, are into these topics such as nutrition and health in general, right? So we're just more aware as entrepreneurs because I guess that's the reason for that is because we need to, right? Because at the end, entrepreneurship is just self-development in disguise, sort of, because you can't really build a company if you don't get your shit together first, and then it becomes also like this because it's a cultural issue as well, right? So the lines, they're not clear, right? So there's always this overlap and intersection between cultural issues, and we've got this culture war going on right now in the public. And so from your country, Canada, is this Jordan Peterson is riding this wave as well, like for a long time has been as a carnivore, for example. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't pay much attention to like mainstream culture and debates and issues and whatever they're trying to distract people with. I don't pay much attention to it. It's kind of enjoyable and entertaining to dip in from time to time and just see what ridiculous claims they're trying to make. It's like conflating working out with like white supremacy, right? Like these kinds of things. It's like, you like to eat steak and work out, you must be a Nazi. It's like, what are you talking about? This is absurd. And that's the world we live in, right? When it comes to like the mainstream media and their desperate attempt to maintain relevance in a world where they are quickly becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
Just the same way that, old school drug dependent approaches to medicine are also becoming obsolete for a large percentage of the population that is just fed up with that kind of a model, right? That wants to actually get to the root of things and actually feel better. And so, I mean, whatever's going on, there's going to be ridiculous arguments to try and distract people and divide people. The best thing to do is just turn it off, right? Just don't pay attention to it. Just really curate the same way it's important for us to be meticulous or relentless, as the word used, about what we put into our body. Maybe even more important is what we're putting into our mind,
Yeah.
because what we put into the mind is going to feed our emotions, feed our paradigm of the world, and then dictate what we ultimately do and then put into our body.
It's kind of hard to do. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So sorry for
Yeah.
interrupting. I
No, no, no.
agree. You're right. It's true, yeah. Because mind body, it's the same. It's we're talking about an interconnection that's it's not divisible. It's just but the discussion can't really be avoided. My argument is that yes, you can through discipline effort you can diminish, reduce your exposure to these toxic because obviously when that happens, like I just want to take the example you brought up, right? When you equate the conscious effort to get in shape with white supremacy, but this is obviously comes from a place of they're just miserable. We're talking about a um, culture of, I don't know, fat, yellow, purple-haired feminists who hate themselves, self-loathing, and then they see other people thrive and they just feel miserable, and that's why they're posting it on Tumblr or whatever. And
Yeah.
so the problem is that they get a say and that they can actually influence a lot of other people. But to stay on topic here. So the thing is, the influencer, because I'm actually mildly optimistic about the future because of that, because people are waking up to this shit, right? So again, alternative media has allowed us to connect with the people we actually want to connect with. And so we can sort of weed out the stuff that is, once you become more aware and more conscious about your choices and the impact those choices have on your own life and on your own performance and on how you influence others, you become also more wise as to how you use your time and where you put your focus and attention on, right? So you can choose
Yeah.
but there's also like this to a certain degree. And so the algorithm is also, because for example, I'm running a podcast, right? I think you do too. Now, you want to be on top of the discussions and you want to be also informed. I mean, YouTube is obviously your go-to source because the consumption, not all consumption is bad, right? You want to get inspiration. You want to get people. I mean, there's a lot of voices out there that are super inspiring, right? But then it's also the algorithm feeds you with the stuff that triggers you, and then it mixes it between it, and then you click on it, and then you see these ways. It's almost impossible for me as well, at least. And maybe you're better at this. I'm not. I'm get. I do
Well,
get
and I
triggered
use
by the.
tools. I use tools to help with that. A great tool everyone should download, at least for your computer, is called News Feed Eradicator. It's a Chrome extension, and it will completely delete your news feed on any social media platform. And so I have that on my computer. So if I go to YouTube to reference a video for work, I don't get a whole, host of things to click on. And same thing with Facebook, Instagram, etc. Right? Because I am distracted. I'm very easily distracted. If I don't have my phone away and those tools in place, it can easily waste hours a day going to look for something and then seeing something else and being curious and just clicking. Oh my God, where'd that 20 minutes go? Right? So
Yeah.
luckily there are tools like these that can really, really help. Another great tool for this on your phone is called one SEC. Amazing tool, amazing app that pattern interrupts you before you go and mindlessly scroll. So we need to arm ourselves with these kinds of things because we are in an information environment that is unprecedented, that we're not designed for, right? We're designed to be like out in the field, hunting, hanging out with our buddies, building, I don't know, spears out of rocks and sticks and things, and be utterly present in one place, all of our attention, right there. But in the modern world, it is not that. And so, I mean, I get you that controversial and polarizing headlines get the most reach. They get the most engagement. And you can, of course, use those things wisely and embed a lot of really good substance, right, in whatever it is you're sharing. And so
Yeah,
I'm a
because
fan.
it's like, because I don't want to completely blend it out or erase it from my screen, from my feed. It should be. The problem I have with it is that it's in mild consumption. It can be actually productive because you get the contrast. Because I'm talking about men's issues here, right? So my focus of the podcast here is I talk about things that men have, that they experience, trying to encourage a better life for them, more fulfillment, more purpose, a different approach, and for first of all, a different approach in the sense that they put themselves first, like as the point of origin, like not this hey, you have to sacrifice yourself for a group of people, women, and they don't even care about you, right? So this is because that's a problem, right? Most men think that they have to be this nice guy. There's a simp epidemic and all of that, all of these problems. Now, you want to have some anti-vision to point to, because you need that. We need that contrast, right? Where we're coming from and where we're headed. So it's important to not completely. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You want to be
There's a
aware. Be
yeah. So
aware of, the pitfalls. Be aware of the opposition. Be aware of the forces that are actively working to distract and weaken you and poison you and toxify
yeah,
you
it's part of
and,
the
replace your values. We
yeah.
are
It's
living
part of
in a information war zone.
yes. That's it's a war. It's a culture war, and it's a. And in order to be a success, I mean, in order to be a war fighter that is gonna win the war, you need to know your enemy, right? So it's not like not a choice. We actually have to engage with the other side. You can put your head into the sand and hope for the best, but it's not a good strategy.
Yeah. And I guess for me, when I'm talking to people to say, like, just turn it off, it's like they've had a lifetime of getting those messages, which are just fear and outrage and lies about nutrition and things like this. So it's like you need a detox period where you just turn it off for a while,
Yeah.
and reset yourself, resensitize yourself, the same way someone who's trying to quit porn would do. You go without it for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, to resensitize yourself to your natural urges and to your ability to connect with a real human being, right? It's all the
Yes.
same kind of thing. We need to resensitize ourselves just the same way that your taste buds, resensitize themselves to sugar and sweets after you go through a ketogenic diet, right? Then you have some refined sugar and you're like, oh my God, that's way too sweet. But like some fruit is perfect. Right. So I'm a
Yes.
fan of all that. But I think the thing that I'm leading towards there is that people tend to change through inspiration rather than force. Right. So it doesn't do me any good to go out trying to convince people that they're wrong or battling against people like, oh, carnivore is better than veganism. Let's have a debate. Right. It just cements people further onto their side. Instead, you do what works for you, share it, and let the results of your life, let your energy, let your physique, let your strength, let your happiness, let your success, let that speak for itself. Share the results, share the fruit of your labors, and other people will see that and they'll think, okay, something's working here, right? He's doing something right. I want to know. I want to know what he's doing. And that's where you have the opportunity to then pour into someone or to share someone because they're open, right? But you have to have someone who's actually open before they're going to actually get benefit out of whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah, but the goal is not to convince the other side, but the ones that are in between.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah. Those who are making up their mind, those who are searching, those who are, struggling to find clarity. And again, the best way to do that is by example, right? You show up, you look good, you feel good, you're healthy, your eyes are bright, your energy is bright, and people can't help but feel that, whether in person or whether through a screen, right? You can just see it. I can see it in your eyes. Your eyes are bright and blue and beaming and vibrant. And it's like there's a natural, intrigue or interest to like, okay, what's Roman doing? How does he look so clear? How does he look so young? This is cool. And then the conversation goes from there. It is, yeah, change is complex, right? Change, transformation, overcoming your past self, recreating yourself anew. It's a kind of complex thing. It can be complex. It doesn't have to be super, super confusing or complicated, but there is a lot of information to sift through, more now than ever. And luckily, also, we have tools that help us sift through that information more effectively. And we have ways, like you mentioned, measurables, wearables, things we can quantify our health with that can make it clearer what actually works, right? Not just what sounds good. And ultimately, that's what I'm most interested in, right? What actually works? What is actually going to make you feel better and perform at your best? Let's focus on that. And the rest can be, put to the side or dealt with later.
yeah, I agree. Okay, amazing. Before we wrap up, would you like to share your um, contact information? What would you like the audience to do? How can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty easy to find. If you search Bryan with a Y, Bryan Hardy, like Hardy Boys or Dan Hardy or, the actor, or Tom Hardy. I'm pretty easy to find. Bryan Hardy Nutrition or Bryan Hardy Health. You'll probably find me on Google or any social media. But if you go to Revitalized Man, that's with a Z or a Z if you're in the US, revitalizedman.com. Everything is linked there, Instagram, social media, YouTube, etc. And on that website as well, you'll find a free guide, and that is my testosterone optimization cheat sheet. And so, as I said, I was burnt out in my mid-20s and operating from a very low place. I became obsessed with these things, and I just went to work and tested everything out. And then my testosterone, when I had it measured, was 1297. completely naturally. And I mean, you look at me, I'm like a lean, I can't even grow a beard if I tried. And so high testosterone comes in many different forms. But one thing's for sure is I felt damn good when I did that test. And I had a partner who knew how good I felt. And just to say that I've done a lot of the research to cut through the crap in terms of if you're interested in having more energy, having a better brain, more drive, more libido, and you want to do it naturally, at least to start. You don't want to go on testosterone replacement right away. That cheat sheet is going to give you a ton of bandwidth. It's going to give you a ton of things to work with and things to avoid, right? So I would say definitely go there, grab that. And if you have any questions, right, reach out. I'm easy to find. I'm easy to connect with. The website, there's ways to do that. There's ways to book free calls and things like that. And I would just love to hear from you. If you got this far in the podcast, I would just love to hear from you. What are you working on? And or if you're struggling with something, what are you struggling with? And I'd be happy to share my thoughts and see if I can point you in the right direction.
Cool. Amazing. You've heard it. So download this cheat sheet. Get your testosterone levels fixed. And yeah, thank you for joining the show. I really appreciated really enjoyed the conversation. It was very insightful, and yeah, all the best.
My pleasure, Roman.
Hardy.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been great to hear about your story and what you're working with. And I know you live quite a I'll say non-ordinary life, and that you're doing some very cool things, right? Both in your podcast and in your website and your business. So I'm similarly intrigued to learn more and stay connected and to keep exploring what you put out there. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Bryan. Take care. Bye-bye.